Welcome, everybody, to episode 159 of Two Goalies, One Mic, brought to you by Fatty Beer Company, Western New York's premier market and tap room with over 300 beers to choose from. All the varieties, shapes, and sizes. Mug Club. I know there's a waiting list at some locations, but make sure you get on that waiting list because it is a deal you cannot pass a chance to get. And of course, great vibes, happy hour, live music, entertainment at all the locations. At Fatty Beer on Instagram and Twitter, fattybeer.com. And of course, Buffalo Logo Apparel, one of the best places to get all of your Buffalo sports apparel needs, whether it's your shirts, your hats, or your hoodies. Make sure you get over to Buffalo Logo. Support all your local designed Buffalo sports when it's the Bills, Bills, Sabres, Bisons. They have everything over there at Buffalo Logo Co. on Instagram and Twitter. Hurl, it's been a minute since we've been on. And not a ton to talk about, right? I mean, we see that Beck Malestein got his arbitration settlement today. What was it, like 2 years for 2 point something million? Nothing too crazy.
It was 2 times 1.2 million, but I could be wrong on that.
But I think total it was like a little over 2 million, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Between the 2 years, yeah. And as of right now, nothing to report on UPL, but I think his arbitration hearing is scheduled for Monday, according to Mike Harrington. So we'll know on Monday what the deal is with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. It is a little concerning to me that a guy in a position that has been just a turnstile for the Sabres since Ryan Miller left, that it's taken this long to figure this out. So I don't know. What do you think the holdup there is?
I think it's just, as with anything with financials and coming to an agreement like this, it's what's best for both the player and the team. And I think as the Sabres and Kevin Adams figure out what they're going to do with the rest of this money, i.e. spending to the cap like we all want, figuring out the goalie position is a pretty big deal. I think we've discussed before that, yeah, UPL was really, really good last year, but it was the only time in his NHL career where he has been consistent for the greater part of the full season. Yeah. So as much as we want to have that long-term deal, it's not necessarily a slam dunk in terms of prolonged production. So I think arbitration in this case is probably what's best for both sides, and they can come to sort of a bridge deal and figure out what works best for both of them. So I'm actually encouraged by it, and I think they're going to get to a number that makes sense for both of them.
Yeah. My thing with it is, to your point too, I think like one side wants this term, one side wants that term. Like, does Kevin Adams kind of go with the same trend he has long-term at this number, or does UPL and his side, I think, I'm not sure what agency is represented by, if it's Newport or not, but like, is he want like a bridge deal, 3 years, or maybe 2 to 3 years at the number maybe that they're talking about, because he wants to cash in after the fact. I don't know what his mindset is, but I just want to get it done, right? I just want to be done. I want to know what the number is. I want to know that he's going to be here, or how long he's going to be here, because I just want to move on with the offseason and continue to talk about this roster.
Yeah, and the only way he's going to cash in after a deal like this or an arbitration like this is if he continues to play well. If he doesn't follow up last season with another season like that or something close to that, he's not going to get another contract similar to this. So something in the middle is incentive for him to keep going and continue to play like we all thought he was eventually going to get to when he was one of the better goalie prospects in the league. And then you can go from there. I think goalies, especially in the NHL, is a non-linear timeline in terms of when they develop, when they get to their prime. Sometimes it's in your late 20s, early 30s. Even me right now, I'm 32 years old, and I feel like I'm playing the best I ever have at the position. I'm not physically feeling the best, but I feel mentally and where I am in terms of reading the game, I feel as good as I've ever felt. And I know that doesn't necessarily translate to NHL goalies, but like with experience and playing time comes results with this position, and it's different for everybody. So I think especially with UPL, with his injuries and the double hip surgery and everything that he went through to get to the point where last season he was a top 5, top 10 goalie in the league, it's going to take a little bit more time. So I think really this is a good result, and that $4.5, $5 million a year for maybe 3 to 4 year contract that we're all projecting, I think is going to be reasonable for both sides.
Yeah. Another thing too with it is the double hip surgery, the injuries. Does UPL, knowing all this stuff that he's already been through physically, by the way, 32, best you've ever been playing, give it 4 or 5 more years when you get arthritis in your left knee like me, and then come talk to me.
I'm trying to stretch every day, so I'm working towards not having that, but I guess we'll see.
Well, for me, it was probably the 25 pounds I put on during COVID. Probably didn't help. I didn't lose it. So I'm trying to lose it now. But anyways, I'm like, but does that come into factor, at least for UPL? Like, do I really want to bet on myself, take the chance of things not going well? Maybe I get hurt and then I don't cash it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. There's 2 different ways of looking at it, to your point. Like, I don't know, man. Hips are a touchy thing, man. Not many guys at his age had that procedure that early in their career. Granted,
but I do think there's a benefit of him having it as early as he did, given that it was probably when he was, I think it was 21, 22 years old. Yeah. Having that type of surgery and having the time to recover that early in his career before he was like fully able to develop as a professional goalie, I think is a positive in the long run.
Could be.
And I think we saw last season that he eventually got to a point where he's not even thinking about that anymore. And I think for the most part, had a completely healthy season, probably for the first time in a while. So I do think there's a benefit to that. But yeah, you do have to think about that as an organization. Obviously, this organization has had their fair share of injury luck and injury issues, especially when you go back to the Eichel situation and how strange and unique that was. But they probably at least have it in the back of their minds when it comes to this arbitration and it comes to these negotiations that, yeah, you're not going to give this guy 7 years for $6 million or even more than that based upon 45 games last season. So I do think they're going to get it figured out. And once they do, it's going to put both UPL and the Sabres in a better position moving forward, knowing that you still have a prospect behind him in Devin Levi that projects to be potentially even a longer-term starter moving forward.
That's what my next point was going to be with Levi. Do you have Levi penciled in as the backup right now?
As of now, yeah.
I think it's his net. I think it's his net to lose.
I agree. But at the same time, I think we could all agree that Devin Levi playing as much as possible is the best thing for his career right now. Yeah. As we saw when he eventually got into that full-time starter role in Rochester and played as well as he did. I think a .920 save percentage, 2.21 GAA compared to his numbers in the NHL were a little bit more sporadic. I think him playing as much as possible when he's 22, 23 years old and getting as many shots as he possibly can at this stage in his career is what's best for him moving forward. So, yeah, I would love to see him solidify that backup role and UPL to play as well as he did last season, but none of that's guaranteed at this point. So I think you start off with that combination, see how UPL does, and if he continues to play at that level he did last season, maybe you think about bringing up Reimer to back up UPL and have Devin Levi play more games in Rochester so he can get his feet wet a little bit more.
I don't mind a kid like Devin in the backup spot just because I love competition. I love internal competition. And I've always believed, and this is myself growing up too, like you find out who you really are as an athlete when faced adversity or face somebody internally that could take your spot at the snap of a finger. I think having that type of pressure makes or breaks who you are as an athlete. And you can go down the list on any sport. Michael Jordan, for instance, like, you know what I mean? Like that guy was Captain Clutch. Like, and pretty much any other sport. Like you look at Josh Allen for the Bills. Like, can they play great when it matters? And if not, is there somebody there that can take that spot for them just like that?
Yeah, I'd argue that UPL was pushed by the presence of Devin Levi when they made that
100%.
When they made that trade, Sam Reinhart, to bring Levi into the organization, there wasn't a blue chip prospect behind him at that point. Maybe Portillo, but he was never projecting in the same stratosphere as Devin Levi was. So maybe bringing Levi in made UPL realize that he had to step his game up a little bit, and combined with full health and a little bit more experience, that caused him to get to the level where he was last season. And also UPL starting last season as the third goalie. That's motivation in and of itself. The fact that Eric Comrie was slated above him on opening night, that, in my opinion, was a sign of a little bit of not necessarily disrespect, but the fact that they hadn't seen much consistency from him. They hadn't seen much confidence when it came to a multiple game stretch. So I think all of this is good for both UPL and Levi, and I feel as good about the Sabres goaltending position as I have since Ryan Miller left, which is saying a lot. That's 10 plus years.
Yep. And again, I just want to get to Monday and have this all figured out and sorted out so we can still continue to talk about the rest of the roster. That being said, the roster as it sits, and I tweeted it out the other day that I wanted somebody to convince me that I should be as optimistic or more optimistic about the roster as it sits right now as I was going into last season. Because we were all very optimistic about this team being a playoff team. Probably almost had them penciled in as a playoff team. And after the year before, they finished 1 point out. You know, we talked about on this show, like, had Devin Levi started his career a week earlier, they were in the playoffs, you know? So for me, like how do I get there? Like, how do I is the biggest addition of this team behind the bench?
I would argue that it's a combination of both Lindy Ruff and the massive, massive improvement to the bottom six. I would say that the third and fourth line are significantly better than they were last season. And that's what gives me a little bit of hope, combined with the fact that there's a lot of really, really tough injury luck last year. When you think about Jack Quinn, you think about Tage Thompson and Alex Tuck starting the year as slow as he did. And Dylan Cousins himself just having largely a pretty bad year combined with all of that. So I think you obviously hope for a little bit more production from your star players as you had in that 2022-2023 season. But combined with the fact that the style of play of this team is going to be a little bit different, and hopefully it's going to reflect the nature of one of the winningest head coaches in NHL history. I think Lindy is going to make them play in a way that we haven't seen in a long time. More hard-nosed, tougher style, way better getting to the front of the net, which I think this bottom six will do a much better job of. Don't necessarily know how those lines are going to formulate at this point. I think that's largely dependent on what happens if they keep this group of forwards in the next 2 months. But the combination of those two things, I really do believe, makes this a better hockey team than it was at this point last year.
Yeah, the bottom six, there's no arguing. It's so improved. You know, I mean, that is a Lindy Ruff bottom six. I wouldn't even go.
It's almost handpicked in terms of the type of player.
Oh, 100%. I wouldn't even go as far as say Ryan McLeod is this new version of Mike Greer. You know what I mean? Great 200-foot player. You know, you put him out there on the penalty kill, might score a few goals. Would you have liked a bigger return for a guy like Matthew Savoy? Absolutely. But I guess I've set on the fact that when you have that many high-end prospects, you're okay to give one up for a guy that's going to help you now, help this roster now, which he will.
Like a current third-line center, and as young as he is, a potential second-line center in the future.
You would hope. Even though like a lot of people out of Edmonton say he played his best offensively on the wing when he was playing with Drysdale. Which
and that just makes him versatile, and that makes him even more valuable.
So but that top six, man, it's just, for me, it's like you're doing what you did last year. You're hoping for progression, not regression, which you hope for that every year. You do. But then you're hoping that not a single one of these guys gets hurt, because in reality, you really don't have anybody in your bottom six that could step right in and fill those shoes. And not to mention, you can say what you want about his season last year, but you've essentially given up 25 to 30 goals in your top six by letting go of by buying out Jeff Skinner. You did. There's no getting by it. You did. You just did. Maybe there'll be a more, defensively responsible top six, without Skinner being there. Sure. But you're just too many variables you're relying on for me to sit here and say that we're in a better position this year than we were last year, because we're one Alex Tuck, Tage Thompson, or Dylan Cousins' injury away from being in the same situation we were last year. And you just, in an 82-game season, you can't, as a GM, you shouldn't do this again. I would feel so much more comfortable if we're putting Benson down on that third line to play with like Zucker and McLeod, and you bring in a guy like, we talked about Nikas a lot. We talked about, there's a long list of players we talked about. Zegras' name has been thrown out a lot. A guy that you could slot into your top six, know he's there, and just gives you more depth up and down your lineup. That's where I'm at, and that's where what I would like to see, and make me get to that point where I want to be, where I'm like, okay, I think this could be a playoff team. I feel confident saying that, because right now I'm not confident in saying that. I'm just not.
Yeah.
When you still haven't figured out your top four defensive pairings. It could still be Yoki Haru.
Yeah, and I guess those concerns are a big reason that I'm not convinced that they're done. And I do think they are a couple steps away of figuring out what their cap situation is going to be after the UPL situation. And did they tender Yoki Haru yet or no?
No.
Okay. So
wait, no, did they sign? No, maybe they did.
Okay, maybe it was Yoki Haru.
I think he signed a deal. I think somebody in the chat did. I think Yoki Haru did sign a deal.
And I think it's just Krebs then, which would be
Krebs. Yeah, which
okay.
is whatever.
So you have two pieces on your roster left to figure out what you're going to do and how much you're going to pay them for this upcoming season. And once you figure that out, you're going to realize how much cap space you have left. And given that trade that Adams made for Ryan McLeod, it was a clear sign that he was willing to give up one of his prospects that didn't have a real shot to make this roster this season. And there's a few more of those guys that have no real shot to make this roster this season. I'm not convinced that he's not done. And I say that because I think he knows as well as anybody that if they underperform in the first 2 months of this season, his job is as good as gone. He needs to be absolutely desperate to get this team in a much better position than they were last October. And as it stands right now, I do believe it is a better position combined, as we mentioned, with bringing in Lindy Ruff, a much improved bottom six. But like, as you said, injuries happen, and they're one injury in their top six away from a situation where you're going to have to move one of those guys up, and you're in as just a troubling situation as you were for most of last season. So I completely agree with you, and I would say 95% of Sabres fans would agree with you too, that it is all but necessary that they make one more move, whether that's for Joel Farabee from the Flyers, or even a guy like Travis Konechny or Trevor Zegras, any one of these guys that have been rumored to be on the trade market. Trading for a guy to bring in to bolster that top six and move one guy down, whether that be Zach Benson or Jason Zucker or whoever, would be the final piece for all of us to feel much better about where this team is right now. And if they don't, and they start off slow, we're all going to look back to this time in the summer where they didn't do anything, where they didn't spend to the cap, where they didn't trade their assets like they could have. So it's kind of an inflection point. And I think we're all going to look back in mid-November or early December and see what happened in the next few weeks. So I guess we can be patient until that happens. We can't get too mad at this point because I think the moves that they've made so far are productive. But if they do nothing else and the season goes awry, you can look back to this point.
Yeah. Yoki Haru signed 3.1 for 1 year. So thanks Captain Ahab and Sabres Coleman standing there for getting that to us. And that's not a contract you sign a guy with, confidence that he's going to be on your team. Like you bring up Joel Farabee, you bring up Travis Konechny. We talked about, guys like Trevor Zegras being available, being talked about constantly. Like Yoki Haru is, could easily be a part of a deal like that. I think especially with a team like the Flyers, who's very thin on their blue line, especially on the right side.
Rasmus Ristolainen being the thinnest.
Yeah. And they're both thin, right? Yeah, I think Ristolainen and Yoki Haru, they're probably still friends, I'd have to imagine. They're probably tight. They're Finnish.
Countrymen, yeah.
Talk Torts into it. Talk Torts into it.
I think they could do it, and Danny Briere, obviously. But, yeah, I feel pretty good about the defense. But, again, that's another injury, another Matthias Samuelsson injury away from being a situation that you're not as confident about.
Yeah, exactly. Again, too many variables. You're depending personally, if you get the Samuelsson from 2 years ago, I'm fine with our top four. 100% fine with it. Good. Let's go. Byron playing with Power, Dahlin playing with Samuelsson. Let's go. But, again, you're just relying on a guy to stay healthy that doesn't really stay healthy. Same thing can be said about Jack Quinn. I know it was an accident, like kind of a freak accident, but still, second major injury in his young career so far. Like, don't want to have to rely on that guy to stay healthy for this to be a solid, reliable top six. And I just feel much more comfortable with a Zach Benson playing with a guy like Tucker and McLeod. I think, like, from a depth perspective, that's where I would be the most confident. Not like a ton to talk about in the NHL right now, but I did see some chatter on the Twitter machine about the upcoming Four Nations tournament next year. You got the Winter Olympics right around the corner, right after that. Like, the Four Nations tournament's like a pre-tournament just to get fans excited, for the NHL returning to the Olympics. First time since 2014 in Sochi. People are talking about the starting goaltending going back to UPL. And I've seen some chatter about UPL. We should be talking about him being the starter, this, that, and the other. Like, don't get me wrong. I want him. I would love to see Ukko Pakalukinen be the starting goaltender for Team Finland. No doubt. But for me, that is UC Saros' not to lose. Right? Like, I had a guy tell me earlier, I mean, he's not a goalie. I mean, he's just one of those biased UPL stan accounts. But, like, made me feel like I was stupid for insinuating that a guy that has this base of work of over a 910, 915, 920 save percentage through his entire career shouldn't be a shoe-in for the starter for Finland, and it should be UPL because of the one good season he's had so far.
Well, like, I mean, I think anybody with a reasonable brain would tell you that that's a ridiculous argument.
But
if UPL
be on the roster,
obviously on the roster, and if he's in the discussion to be the starter, I guess that would be in February. Then that is really good news for the Sabres. That is the best possible thing you could possibly imagine. If he is in a legitimate battle with UC Saros to be the starter for Finland, the Sabres are probably going to make the playoffs if that's the case. So I really, really hope that happens. But as it currently stands, obviously UC Saros is the current starter, and then you go from there.
It is not to lose, right? And I'm not trying to have this discussion or this debate because, like, I don't think UPL is capable of being. I definitely think he's capable. If he starts off this season the way last season went, if he picks up right where he left off, absolutely we're having that discussion. But even then, like, I think Saros would absolutely have to piss down his leg the first half of this season to lose that net in Finland, because, again, like, you can talk about UPL's success on an international stage in the the U18, the U20 junior tournaments. Yes, he's won a couple gold, but at the end of the day, this is the biggest tournament in the world. Sorry, no junior tournament holds a candle to the Olympics. No shot. Like, the way I gauge international tournaments, it's the Olympics, it's the World Cup of Hockey, if and when it comes back, and then it's the U18s, the U20s. That's just my opinion. I think any NHL player would tell you the exact same thing.
Yeah, I mean, especially when it's best on best and NHL players playing in the tournament.
And if you're picking the team for Finland and you're sliding in that first goaltender, how are you going to pick a guy who has 1 year of work, a body of work of one season, compared to a guy like Saros who's done it for 5, 6, 7 years in a row?
It's not a legitimate discussion at this point, but if it turns out to be in 5 months, that'd be great.
Absolutely. How has your summer been, bud? Like, what have you been up to? We haven't really talked much.
Pretty good. Playing a lot of golf, getting a lot better.
I wish.
Yeah, playing a lot of hockey too. I'm playing 2 nights a week. I'm in the top division on Wednesday nights, and then in the second division on Thursday. And like I said, I'm playing about as well as I've ever played in a really long time. And I feel really good about where my game's at. And I'm on 2 really good teams. We're in playoff position, top of our division at both of them. So that's been good. And work's been busy. Doing a little bit more editing now. I'm typically just a producer, and now I'm actually physically editing as well. When you're a producer and an editor, some people call that a predator, but I would rather not be called a predator. So not like a UC Saros predator, like a PREDITOR, but then that just makes you sound like someone who's creepily preying on children. So I would prefer people don't call me a predator. But if you do that, we can discuss what it actually means. But yeah, everything's good. I've appreciated the break. I'll say that, especially after the Bills season, and as stressful as the Sabres season was, and as frustrating as it was, I do like to take this time sometimes to get away from everything and refresh the mind before we get back into it. Because I think both of these seasons coming up for both the Sabres and the Bills are, I think, it'd be a little bit stressful, but I also think really intriguing and really exciting. I think some people have a bit of a pessimistic view for both teams, but I'm actually really excited with the additions and subtractions that both teams have made, to be honest. So really looking forward to it. And only have about a month and a half here before we really get going with both teams.
I've been unable to get out as golf as much as I normally would. Like, I think normally by now, especially like in Buffalo, like I would have been out probably 30 times by now. I could say that I've been out less than 10, which, I'm kind of disappointed in myself at the current time, because I love to get out and swing the sticks. But hopefully that all changes in the next couple weeks. Some things slow down at work. But summer has been fun. It's definitely had the heat wave here in Buffalo, which is like every week out in Cali for you guys. So, nothing new there. But we got a lot of rain here in Buffalo, man. It has been a wet summer too. Wet and humid.
It may not have rained in like 4 months here. So
that's you can have it. You can have it.
I wish it has, to be honest. It's nice to have the differentiation. But yeah, everything's good. Looking forward to get going here in a little bit. But as we said, I think Monday with the arbitration for EPL and figuring out the Krebs situation and everything else, I think is going to paint a clearer picture moving forward for this team. And then maybe in the month of August, as slow as it is sometimes, or even in early to mid-September, I think there could be a little bit of movement once teams' training camp rosters come into shape. Even a guy, as there was some news today that Matai Michkov arrived in the United States from Russia for the Flyers. Top prospect in the 2023 draft and many other drafts. If a guy not named Connor Bedard was not at the top of that draft, that Michkov would be the clear-cut number one pick in any single draft, unrelated to
some people even had him ahead of Bedard, honestly.
Yeah, unrelated to any immigration issues or anything that anyone thought that he wasn't going to be able to get over from Russia. He arrived in Philadelphia today. He had his hockey sticks with him. Daniel Briere was carrying his sticks in the airport. So that is as good of indication as any that he's probably going to make the team. And that's one less forward spot for a guy like, well, not necessarily a guy like Joel Farabee, but potentially in your top or middle six that one other guy could be dispensable in that lineup. So there are situations that can transpire in mid-September that could be favorable for the Sabres moving forward.
Who's the guy you want the most? Like one player, gun to your head, who are you putting in your top six outside of the organization? And is it a gun to your head outside the organization, gun to your head, current prospect in the pool?
Oof, gosh. Outside of the organization, once I saw that rumor, which I don't know if it was legitimate or not, I think I would say Zegras, just because of like how unbelievably fun it would be. We've added so much grit, so much toughness to the bottom of that roster, that if you had a guy with that much skill and that much playmaking ability to as many goal scorers as they currently have, and he can score goals himself, and as young as he is, I think he would just be, and he's a face as well. Like, he was the one hockey player at Michael Rubin's July 4th party. He potentially is a face of the league type guy. I think that would be absolutely incredible, and you obviously slot him in on that top line. And within the organization, I'd say Yuri Kulik. I think a lot of people have been excited for him for a couple of years now, and that is directly related to his goal-scoring ability and what he could potentially add once he gets to the pros. So I would say those are my two guys.
I think I'm going to go Travis Konechny. I think that he's more of a Lindy Ruff style player. 68 points last season on a bad Flyers team. +4, plus minus doesn't mean much as it used to, but like, you know what I mean? And then I would go Yuri Kulik as well. 100%. I think Yuri Kulik, if there's a spot available for a prospect on this roster this season, it's his to lose, in my opinion. I do want to touch on this one last thing right here. Why would you need Yoki Harju when you have Ryan Johnson? What is Ryan Johnson's? Does he have a spot on this team next year? Because he is not being talked about.
Yeah, I think he has been forgotten in the stray of the sense that he didn't play as many games last season, and the games he played were towards the middle to the end of the season when some people have already lost interest. But I think everybody who watched this team closely saw his potential in every single game he played. I think there were some growing pains in the sense that it was his first year in the league, and he's basically coming right out of college, and he's still relatively young. But you can see that the level of talent and the level of playmaking that he possessed. His underlying numbers were all really good. And
I think it hurts him. He's a left-handed shot.
Yeah, and another lefty to add to the bunch of skilled left-handed defensemen that they already have. But you can never have too much of a good thing. And you can just tell that he's a really good player. So that's not necessarily a backup plan, because I think he has a right to go into camp and make this roster outright. But it's a nice security blanket to have, and a guy that you can put in Rochester if you need to, and then go from there.
He could be one of those guys on the outside looking in too, because of the fact that he is a left-handed shot defenseman. We'll see. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, not really. I'm really interested to see what that arbitration comes out to with UPL. I really am projecting the 4.5, 5 range, maybe 3-4 years, similar to other contracts for goalies that have had similar amounts of games. UC Saros was actually one of them when he was UPL's age. So we'll see what happens with that, and I think there's going to be a much clearer picture for what the Sabres do moving forward once they figure out that situation. And as I said, I am not convinced that Kevin Adams is done. I think everybody has obviously been screaming about it for the past 3 weeks. I think the Ryan McLeod trade silenced that a tiny bit, and it showed that Adams is willing to trade a prospect for a established NHL player at the moment. And you see what's out there. You keep the phone line open, and I think this could go into mid-late September, as I said, with situations like prospects coming over and guys making the team when you didn't think they necessarily would. So I think patience is key for all of us, and as hard as it is, with as little success as this team and organization has had recently, season doesn't start till early to mid-October. So there is some time left, and I am cautiously optimistic that they are going to get something done.
Great. Well, everybody, thanks for hopping on with us. An impromptu episode of Two Goalies, One Mic. Remember, brought to you by Fatty Beer, Western New York's Premier Market and Tap Room, and, of course, Buffalo Go Apparel, one of the best spots to get all of your locally designed Buffalo sports apparel needs, whether it's your Bills, your Sabres, your Bisons. They have everything at Buffalo Go Co on Instagram and Twitter. I am Duane for Hurls. It's been episode 159 of Two Goalies, One Mic, signing off. You guys enjoy the week, and maybe we'll talk to you next week. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Different than they did before, like the sort of good and the holy.